Hey guys, hey Jay and hey Eloisa, if hopefully I pronounced your name right, Eloisa. Apologize if I didn't. You guys can just give me a quick thumbs up that you guys can hear us. Everything's good on your end. We'll start in a bit. Perfect.
Hi everyone, my name is Tej Yale. I'm the founder and CEO of Think Impact. We're a marketing company based out of Rochester Hills, Michigan. Today I'm fortunate to have Kunal Bhatia, the co-founder of Midwest Advanced Solutions and Services, Inc. They're a Michigan-based technology and implementation solutions partner. He's also an experienced software engineer, coder, and entrepreneur, and got an OU MBA degree from Oakland University in Rochester. And they develop software web services, APIs, as well as web and mobile applications. And in addition to that, provide technical and business consulting. So Kunal, thanks for being here. Appreciate you having you on.
Yeah, thank you guys. Looks like we got one more attendee. Hi Vishal, how are you? You can just give a thumbs up if you can hear me.
Hey Kunal, I'm good. I'm doing good.
Good to hear from you. So I think let me know when we can start, Tej. And
yeah, it's actually recording. Okay. So Kunal will, obviously during these difficult times, work from home seems to be the main or the new norm, as they say, given the current events. So right now I'm just going to turn it over to Kunal, and he'll be talking about work from home implementation strategies that companies can utilize in their day-to-day operations, regardless of the size of the company. So Kunal, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. I think it still says disabled participant screening.
Try now.
Oh, okay. So you guys can see my screen. Okay. So afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to get started on my presentation. So basically, this is just, working from home tips that are anecdotal. In other words, what I have observed work for me. And with that hope, I'm pretty sure it'll help the audience members as well, because some of these are pretty straightforward and quickly can help you kind of build and maximize on your work from home experience. All right, so first things first, I want to kind of go over what people have impressions. What are their impressions over, remote working? Some of the impressions people have is like, do the remote workers even work? And the most common impression I've heard about remote working is that, people assume remote working only started recently. And, even if I ask some of you guys, you might think, it's maybe 10, 20, maybe 25 years old. That's the common kind of perception people have, that it's relatively new since the internet and so on and so forth. In actuality, remote working is more than 40 years old. It was first introduced by IBM in 1979. And at that time, too, it wasn't just for technology or IT. IBM had enacted policies in the 80s to include all team members in marketing, sales, and others. And they even invested a lot of resources and money into this remote working policies. For instance, they helped install remote terminals at their employees' homes. And for IBM, it was such a success story that by 2009, 40% of their nearly 400,000 employees were working remotely. So, this kind of dispels the notion that it's relatively new or it's the last few years. It's not. It's been employed and processed by large corporations for a long time. Now, some of the upsides and positives and benefits that I've seen from working from home is, no need to drive 30, 40 minutes to and from work. No need to spend on gas money or eating outside. For me, that's a big deal because, for some of us, we drive like 2 hours or 3 hours per day commuting. This is like a huge time and money savings aspect, which can become a control indicator for us because, if it's a control indicator, we have the power to make changes to our behavior and savings in time and money. And with these savings, we can then control, how we want to spend them. Like if we want to get up a little bit early to start work and end our work earlier if possible. The other thing I've noticed is, when I'm at home and someone of my personality, I prefer kind of not being bothered while I'm working. So it really helps to be at home and just kind of close the door and just get that quiet time while working. No need to deal with noise from a cubicle next to you or foot traffic that we all encounter when we're at an office space. In fact, research has shown that remote workers are more productive than, on-site workers. And it's probably likely because of some of these distractions that some of us no longer have to experience when compared to working at an office space. So let's get to the tips. The first most important kind of advice I can give is, talk to your lead supervisor on their expectations and needs, and talk with them often. Set your own start times and dates. Figure out what works with your manager, and figure out the start times, the break times. For instance, for me, it's pretty easy for me to kind of tell my manager that I'll start work a little bit early, and I can be done a little bit earlier, and I'll have some breaks in between, from 11:15 a.m. till 1 p.m. due to family commitments. So I've been able to build that rapport and that expectation, and it's kind of smooth after having those set of conversations with my manager. The second thing is, set clear expectations with your roommates or family members. It's a bit difficult with family and kids, but it's still necessary because, what you're doing is you're creating a setup for people in your house to expect from, a process, a structure. So that includes things like, what times you start work and what times you take a break or what times you end work. And when it's clear with your roommates, housemates, your family, then there is less of that a mix of work from home as well as being at home aspect. It again revolves around the basic concept of protecting your work-life balance. So, work when you're supposed to work and then enjoy time during breaks. The next thing that has worked for me is I tend to measure my productivity per day or per week and know for myself how much I can get done, whether that's, tasks per day that I can complete in a day or in a week. So that is something that I've learned to, measure myself. And overall, what this ends up being is, the first step is through measuring for a couple of weeks, then I figure out, what, there are some things that I can do better and I can increase my, numbers by 10 to 20%. So this has been very, very useful as a productivity hack, especially in terms of making my manager happy. Plus, I get a good feeling that, I've accomplished a few things extra by the end of the week. So the other thing that I can talk about is that's equally important is about working loud or putting it in more business terms of over communicating. So over communicating basically means For me, it meant, sharing my work progress often, and in addition to when my boss asks for it. So, in that, basically being more intentional when sharing your what you've accomplished or what you're working on. Also, it involves pulling people into your work and showcasing openly and asking for feedback. Um, this also brings forth a good opportunity to build strong rapport with your manager and coworkers. Often as remote workers, um, especially if it's like a hybrid environment where some of us are remote and some of us are working from the office, the remote workers tend to be forgotten or not. It's as if they're invisible. So by over communicating and being intentional with your communication with your boss and coworkers, you bring them into your quote unquote work life. You kind of let them know that, hey, I exist and I'm getting things done for you. And that will help kind of build a strong rapport with your teammates as well as your manager. So basically, let them know often that you're working hard and you're getting things done from them. Finally, work when you have the set expectation that you're working, and that means reducing distractions during work time. Turn off that TV, minimize use of phones and devices. It's an obvious statement, but it's worth stating that distractions do impact our productivity. Now, this is some aspect to finding a dedicated workspace that I've been experimenting with, and it's worked for me. It's also important because what it does is when you have a dedicated workspace that works for you, then you can build a sustainable working environment while working from home. And for some people, it can be anything. It can be like a desk and a chair and a table, and that's good enough. For others, it can be like your own little home office. What I would recommend people is just to start off is just try out places at your home and ask yourself while you're working there, which spaces make you feel calm, productive, and have less distractions. Is there a spot in your home where you can get that and you can get work done comfortably for hours on end? That's the key here. For me, I don't think sitting on a couch works for me. So I have my own home office, and I prefer the privacy of my home office. Whatever works for you, it's up to you to try it. All I'm asking in this aspect is, find out maybe there's more than one space that works for you. You can have multiple spaces for working for diverse types of work and activities. For example, the photo that you see on the left, my swing, that's where I sit and I listen to calls, take calls, and do some reading or analysis work. And then otherwise I just sit on my desk and I get things done. The key out of this aspect is, finding that space that works for you and then just sticking to it and being consistent with it. So basically, to summarize, just remote working is not new. It's more than 40 years old. It has worked well. And so if some of you are new to it, don't fret. There's plenty of information out there on people who have made it successful. You can also reach out to me and ask me questions, and I'll gladly be able to help you. In my personal opinion, I think you can make this a very good experience, and you can enjoy this experience as well as be productive. So I think make the most of remote working experience, guys. And I think that's pretty much it. You guys have any questions?
Kunal, I just have...
Working from remote, wouldn't you feel sometimes you're isolated and sort of getting cocooned without having camaraderie with your colleagues? Because people always say productivity increases with camaraderie and bumping shoulders with your colleagues in an environment where it gives you more creative knowledge as opposed to being in a shell, so to speak, because you're so focused that you may not even have outside view. So I guess my point is there is good and bad things about both. I guess so. When you weigh the things between the two, do you think working remote would bring in more creative thinking, or do you think working with colleagues and in a distributed environment would be more creative thinking?
Okay, so your question is in terms of creativity, will someone be more creative working from home,
Mm-hmm.
Alone versus working in an environment? I think that's a pretty what if question. That is a question that depends on scenarios.
Yeah.
You probably heard of like people who were hermits for years. They don't connect with civilization. They just live in their own little apartment, and then they come back a year later, a couple of years later, with like the best selling novel or book out there. So there are people with that personality. For them, it works perfectly well to be disconnected from society. For others, it makes sense to always connect. And for those people, the second kinds of people, it's harder, yes, at this time, because you're not physically talking with people. I would suggest trying at best you can to call the people that you work with, that you gain knowledge and that positive vibe and that creative vibe from, calling them, getting on a video conference call as more often as you can, more often than you usually do, and trying that as an aspect to see if that helps you get more creativity. I'm assuming you've probably tried that, Jay. Have you tried doing that, talking with them more often?
Yeah, in my personal case, I mean, I have to be at work. I am at work quite
Okay.
often.
Yeah.
And plus, obviously, we have to work from home. We do that. But I was asking in general, because we have a lot of employees they do work from home right now. But
Yeah.
my thoughts were something that I wanted to concur or try to understand what others think, so to speak. So
So
I guess,
for me, I can tell you, Jay, is like, my work is also creative. I'm a developer, a software engineer. I'm a lot more productive, and from my story, I was never a proponent of remote working. I was always somebody who would say, I need to rub shoulders. I need to go out there and be at the office, be at the client, and often, that's what I do. 99% of the time, I work with clients at their offices. Um, it's because I've been forced to work from home, I've been forced to rethink this. And over the weeks and months, I've realized that actually this isn't so bad. And if anything, my manager is more happier with me now
yeah,
that I'm
yeah.
working from home. And I am also, I do what is called measurements and quantitative numbering. So I'm looking at my numbers and I'm like, I'm a lot more productive right now.
Yeah.
And that's how like I was trying to understand, how is this possible that when I go to the office, I can only do so much within those 8 hours, but here I can put in 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours. And even at the office space, I do put in a couple of more hours, but it's just not the same where, at the office, this is my personality. I get like, oh, I'm getting bothered by somebody who's asking me for help, and okay, I gotta go help them. Then I realize I come back, oh, I missed a couple of hours of work that I need to finish, and now I'll have to wait for it for tomorrow. Um, I don't have much of that. People do reach out to me, but it's completely different. It's a different feeling. So for me, it's the exact opposite of what you were saying. For me, it's
Yeah.
like I'm a lot more creative, but I can tell you there are people who are going to say they're less creative, and that's why everybody's got to find out and do their thing, albeit with this restriction, which is working from home.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Kunal. I had a quick question. I know we touched briefly at the outset of about your company, Mass. I was just
Yes.
wondering if you can kind of expand on some of the projects or services that you offer. That way, people that are tuned in, if they're interested, they can
Sure.
learn
Yeah.
more about your company.
Yeah, I'll just pull up my website. And while I'm doing that, do you guys have any other questions, Vishal or Tej? Do you have any questions regarding the presentation?
Yeah, I think Kunal, from my end, I think the biggest challenge which I face is that I have a team. I have like 5 people under me, so having effective governance while working from home sometimes is difficult because mine is more of a financial job, and most of my team particularly faces the exchanges all over the world. So
Hmm.
from my it's very dynamic when it's on the floor, so you can understand the dynamism. And now it's completely opposite that we need constant communication with each other. But now I
Yeah.
think it's becoming difficult as a manager to kind of have that instant communication. And we try doing that on Zoom and other portals, but yes, not the ideal governance is not coming through. So that's what I was looking out for, if there are any tips for that.
So so you're asking from a manager standpoint. I think I touched
Yes.
based on this, but I can go over that aspect too. I think that really should come from your subordinates, your the people who work for you, and that is something that I touched base on with my manager. That I felt like it's my responsibility. What I noticed was my manager was feeling the same thing that you're feeling. Like he was saying, there's lack of kind of oversight. They don't know what people are doing. And so my first job, at least from my perspective, was um, I was just constantly over communicating with my manager day in and day out. I don't do it so much because now we've built that bridge. But in the beginning, the first few weeks, I was reaching out with my status. Sometimes he would say like, "Oh, we just touched base on this topic in the morning." I said, "Yeah, I just want to let you know this is how much I've done today." And over time, I realized he was happier with that. And what I understood from putting myself in the manager's shoes was like, it's as if like the manager had all these tools, which is visual cues that they could see a worker working at the office from a distance from their office. They could see people in their cubicles, and that was their visual cue that things were okay, and they could see the results, of course. What I noticed was that this is where both sides need to kind of step up to the plate. Obviously, managers need to figure out better cues, better tools. Uh, Also, the employees need to be encouraged to push and over communicate and talk more about what you're working on, including stuff that they've not finished. Just let the manager supervisor know that here's what they finished at the end of the day, or here's where they're stuck. And I think not doing that will further kind of distance the manager from his or her workers, and it'll make the manager more worried. So I would go back to your team and tell them, hey, I want you guys to step up, and here's how I want you to do. I want you to come to me as soon as you have even a small nugget of work done, and let me know that what you've completed. It's okay if you're not completed, but as long as there's progress, and kind of set that expectation, change that communication, that culture itself. You may have to change the culture too, where now in an ideal situation, your subordinates are literally calling you minute after minute, hour after hour, telling you that, hey, here's where we're stuck on, here's what we accomplished. And you may be overwhelmed with that, but just let that flow happen, because that's what you in the end need. Then you can kind of create a structure around it and say, okay, what now I can see these people are doing something, as opposed to me not being aware of what they're doing because I don't see them physically. So I think maybe that could help you. Does any of that make sense?
Yeah, that's a pretty good tip. I'll do that.
Yeah, and I think it has to come from them too. You should definitely push, but you will notice a few of them taking that initiative, and those will eventually be the stars of your team in the new norm, so to speak. Okay, so I'll just briefly talk about what I do in my company and how I came to be. I think the audience here is, they probably are interested in my story as opposed to the portfolio, the technical stuff that I've done, which I can always delve into if someone's interested. But basically, how I came to be is, how our company came to be was in 2014. I was working at General Motors at that time, and I just had a nagging feeling at that time that, I can do a lot more than just do a few things here and there in terms of technical work. I can have my own business. And so I left General Motors 2013, and in 2014 I started Mass Inc. Me and Lakshmi, my co-founder, and then we had a bunch of projects here and there. The last few projects, I worked at Jackson National Life, and we were part of a multi-phase implementation to upgrade their identity system. And often most of our projects have been that, where we're upgrading an existing system, which is using older technology to more newer, SaaS model web services and so on and so forth. And so that's really where my value proposition lies in working for clients, in many cases full-time at their premises as an independent consultant, in a way to build their software and upgrade their system to more upgraded standards. And so the three projects that I'm listing out that you guys can see is for Jackson National Life, Mercedes-Benz, and right now I'm working at Meridian, which is healthcare. That's a new thing for me. I like challenges like that. So I've come from like automotive and finance, and now for the first time I'm kind of jumping into healthcare, which is, completely different world. They don't take even the organizational structure and the culture is completely different than the cultures that I've seen in automotive or finance. So it's exciting for me to be right now working for a healthcare client.
Kunal, I also had a question for aspiring entrepreneurs. I think to the productivity point that you talked about in your presentation, they kind of have a different term called imposter syndrome in terms of burnout and things like that. So I know we kind of touched on the work from home capabilities, but do you have any other tips for, for aspiring entrepreneurs about avoiding burnout? Obviously, it can get pretty overwhelming.
Burnout is real. I mean, make no mistake about it. Burnout does exist. For me, I'm fortunate enough to be surrounded by the kind of people who kind of help me out, my family, my son. If anything, for me, I can attribute my productivity to this factor that when I'm supposed to be working, when I need to get something done, no one's going to bother me. But then I need to kind of take a break, and I've set that expectation in my manager that, hey, I'm not going to be available at these times, and you should be okay with that. And then during those times, like I said, between 11:15 to 1 p.m., I'm having lunch with my family downstairs in the kitchen. I've been fortunate enough to do that. I've had those moments in the past where I was fortunate enough to work nearby, so I could just go home and spend time with family. And then I've had situations where I couldn't get time to meet my family until it's like 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. at night. And I've noticed the latter ones where I've spent time away from my family, I've noticed myself getting closer towards burnout. So for me, one key ingredient, again, it's for me, it has worked for me, is that I need to have allocated time during the day, every day, with my family. If I don't get that, I'm not going to be happy. And if I'm not going to be happy, then there's a chance I could get burnout. So that, as well as some meditation, has helped me. I would say you have to, for entrepreneurs out there, you have to find that nugget of positivity and energy. And then you have to allocate your time to that. Working as an entrepreneur, working as a business owner, we all know this. There's always a list of things to do, and it's never going to end. That list just keeps on increasing. So we have to then take a break and allocate our time on things that are important to us, and give us that positive energy. Because if we have that positive energy, then we get kind of juiced up. We get our batteries recharged, and then we can go back to getting more work done. So I think that's kind of, I'm not sure if that helps you or helps most of the people on the phone, as audience members, but I think that, you need to take a break and kind of find ways to re-energize yourself before you go back.
Sounds good. Were there any other questions for those of you on the call? Sounds good then. I think the one last question that I had, Kunal, was obviously these are difficult times.
Yeah.
Are there any uplifting messages, that you can provide, if an entrepreneur is kind of down and out because of, what this pandemic has caused? Are there any positive messages that you can share with the group?
Yeah, I think, so a lot of us are entrepreneurs, right? I think even if you don't have a company or an entrepreneur, if you're in the aspect of, helping people and coming up with solutions, I think entrepreneurs in general are a different breed. We're the kind of people who don't give up. So even if a situation like this exists, that we're in, this pandemic, I would say, take a breather. You're going to keep fighting. You're going to keep figuring out a new way out of this. Spend time with people and things that really uplift you, give you that energy so you can fight another day. But don't give up. You can't give up on what you're trying to pursue, because if it's important to you, you're gonna pursue it, and you're gonna get to the end goal regardless. So just like you said, try to avoid burnout. Figure out and structure your time effectively. Oh, I think you're muted, Tej.
Yeah, no, I was just saying thanks for accommodating the interview. And
Sure.
I believe that you've provided your email. So for those of us that are on this call, if you would like a copy of the deck, you can either email Kunal or me as well. I have a copy of the deck and would be glad to send it to anyone that's interested. So thank you, Kunal. Greatly appreciate it again, and I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Sounds good. Thank you, guys. Thank you for attending.
All right.
It looks like, does Jay have a question, or is that more like a clap? Okay, that's a clap. All right. Thank you, guys. Have a nice day, guys. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you too.